Hello and welcome to Run Testers. My name's Nick and this is our review of the Adidas Adizero SL. So the Adizero SL is a new shoe from Adidas. It's coming in to replace the SL20 in their range, and it's a new member of the Adizero range as well. It's designed to be a cheaper entry-level shoe for the Adizero range, which obviously includes long-running classic lines like the Adios and Boston, as well as Adidas's top racing shoes like the Prime X, the Adios Pro 3, the Takumi Sen 8. So it's bringing a little bit of the stuff you get in those shoes down to a more affordable price point. It's £110 in the UK, $120 in the US. The SL in the name stands for super light, but actually just reasonably light, I'd say. RL maybe. It's 260 grams and 9.2 ounces in my UK size 9. It's got a 10mm drop from heel to toe with a stack height of 35mm at the heel and 25 at the forefoot. So you've got a mesh upper with quite a lot of padding on the heel here of the shoe, which speaks to the fact this is a shoe that's designed to be used quite a lot for daily training, so there's a bit of extra comfort there. And in the midsole, you've got a little bit of Lightstrike Pro under the forefoot, a puck of Lightstrike Pro that sits under the forefoot of the shoe that's fully encased in Lightstrike EVA foam. So it's a similar dual density setup to shoes like the Adios and the Boston, which both use Lightstrike EVA and Lightstrike Pro as well, but it's fair to say there's more Lightstrike EVA in the SL. That's the main part of the midsole here, with just that little bit of a forefoot puck of the softer, bouncier Lightstrike Pro foam that's used for the midsoles and things like the Adios Pro 3. Something that has been taken from the Adios Pro 3, I think, is the midsole geometry of the shoe, which has got that sculpted midsole with a few cutouts there and has a probably slightly more of a rocker feel to it than things like the Adios. It's built a bit more in line with the Adios Pro 3, the geometry of the shoe is anyway. And then on the outsole, you've got just a rubber outsole. It's not continental rubber, it doesn't have that usual little toe section of continental rubber that you usually have in Adidas shoes, but actually this has been pretty good for me in terms of grip, and I expect it to be nice and durable as well.
Quick word on fit for me then. I ran in a UK 8.5, which is my normal size, and I would be recommending people go true to size with a few caveats here. When I first put these on, I had to loosen the laces off quite a lot, so there's not an awful lot of lace left over at the end. And I think these shoes basically do that kind of Adidas thing where sometimes they come up a bit tight across the kind of top of the midfoot. They've got a very, very sort of huggy hold. It's very sort of snug. They've not got the roomiest kind of toe box either, but they do have really good heel hold from that massive kind of lot of cushioning that goes around there, and the tongue kind of sits down well. I don't think I would like to go up half a size. I think the true to size would be what I'd recommend, although you are going to get a very snug fit.
So the Adizero SL fits me very well, true to size, but I am slightly small for my size, and I would say the shoe is fairly snug, both really around the midfoot and especially around the toes. Actually, on longer runs in the shoe, I did find that my toes were quite close to the front of the shoe, and it wasn't really a problem for me. It was comfortable, but I'd say a lot of people might find that the shoe does run a little bit too small, and maybe going up half a size would create a more comfortable fit for regular use, especially on longer runs.
Onto the run test then. Now, I've done around 30 miles in the Adidas Adizero SL. That is a mixture of terrain, so I've run on kind of pavements, I've run on wet roads, I've run on dry roads, I've done river paths, park paths, sort of compacted gravel, that kind of thing. Again, my usual terrain, mix of paces, mix of intensities. I've put them through a half marathon. It was a slow one, it wasn't in race conditions, but during that half marathon I had some kind of tempo miles thrown in. I've also done some all-out kind of miles within kind of interval sessions in them, so I've done everything from slow and really easy ploddy right up to kind of fast and clipped, kind of sustained. I did a bit of a progression sort of running them as well. So I've tested them out across pretty much everything that you'd want to throw at this shoe as a daily trainer. So the first thing I think you notice about these shoes is just how firm that midsole is with the Lightstrike EVA and that kind of Lightstrike Pro unit up the front. I was expecting a little bit more of a ride, a little bit like a Takumi Sen or an Adios Pro, and I know those are kind of got full-length Lightstrike Pro foam, but these shoes really kind of have very little of that, and it comes up as a really kind of firm ride. And I'm a big fan of firm ride shoes in general, but these come up kind of even, I think, at the extreme end of something that I would normally run in. I think this doesn't really have the kind of punchiness or the cushion protection that you'll find from other daily trainers in this bracket. Now, Adidas says that this is supposed to be a fast daily trainer, and I definitely found that it was a better ride overall. It was more punchy when I was up at my kind of best form, running kind of mid to forefoot. So, that tends to happen when I'm running at my fastest pace. I can be a bit kind of lazy and sort of sloppy in my form when I'm running slower. And that's really when it came to life. When I was clipping over, I did some sort of 6.5 minute miles, which is kind of closer to my kind of marathon pace. And that's when the shoe, I think, really kind of came to life. But not necessarily just about the pace, it's more about how my feet were striking the ground. You know, where I was sort of actually engaging that kind of Lightstrike Pro foam. Where I didn't really enjoy them as much was when I was landing, you know, further back on my heels, moving at slower places, you know, on my kind of easier plodding runs, where I'm definitely landing further back on that EVA Lightstrike, which just felt far less kind of forgiving. You're not getting the protection, you're not getting any punch or pop when you're running like that out of these, really. And overall, on those runs, I think they felt really sort of slightly too firm for me. So when you're moving, I think with a quicker cadence, with a form that takes you up onto your kind of mid to forefoot, you know, you're basically pushing out snappier miles. That's when I think these shoes really come into their own. And that's where you find some of the pop that you might find from those other shoes that I've mentioned. I mean, it's still not the same, but you start to get nearer to that. At slower paces, with heavier footfall, when you're landing more on that kind of EVA Lightstrike, they're much less forgiving. And now for me, that becomes a little bit of a problem when you start to talk about the versatility of the shoe, particularly when you look at some of the things that it might go up against, which are really good in terms of that overall range. You know, you might think about kind of a Speed 3 or a Puma Velocity Nitro 2 or a Hoka Mach 5. These don't really have that. They don't really cater for that in my book anyway. They weren't really a shoe that I think had that kind of overall range. One thing you do get, I think you've got a nice kind of wide sort of mid to forefoot base, so you get a good amount of stability. That sort of firmer EVA foam also, I think, lends itself so you get sort of solid stability, and in that sense I think they're actually quite a positive shoe. You know, there's no sort of turning, no sort of strange wobbling. I think these are a good kind of stable ride. The mesh uppers found were fine. You know, there's nothing really stand out here either way, positive or negative, just a really sort of good standard breathable mesh upper. Overall, my foot was held really nicely in place. You know, you've got those big kind of cushioned heel collars that mean there was no slipping in the heel, but I think you're going to have to like a really kind of snug fit to enjoy these overall. If you like it kind of tight and kind of cocooning around the foot, that's great. I found them a little bit claustrophobic. Sometimes my feet felt a little bit numb in the first few miles. I don't know whether these will loosen off over sort of more and more miles, but it was just a little bit tight and constrictive for my preferences. You know, flip them over on the outsole, you know, that grip was solid. I ran in very wet conditions on wet kind of concrete and pavements and tarmac. I also did some sort of those river paths in kind of muddy puddles and bits and pieces. So you talk about sort of slightly sort of thin layer of kind of sloppy mud with gravel underneath. And they coped when I was sort of shifting through those at high paces. Not so great on sort of wet, slippy cobbles, but not many shoes sort of manage that, particularly road shoes. So overall, I found them fine for grip, you know, good solid performance here. And then I think when you're talking about durability, I think one thing that comes with that kind of having that sort of slightly firmer EVA sort of midsole foam, these are well built, they're well put together. I think they'll last a lot of miles. I can see that you'll get kind of 300, 400, 500 miles out of these easily and without any kind of fear of that midsole compressing. That's partly thanks to that firmness.
So I've done a nice range of daily training in the Adizero SL, including some just all-out easy effort and then some progression runs, moving from easy paces to steady and tempo paces, some short, sharp intervals and strides, stuff like that. And yeah, I'm not really convinced by it. I say, first few runs in the shoe, I was quite liking it. I have to say, I did find it quite versatile. It wasn't too firm and uncomfortable. I think it certainly had a little bit more cushioning and a slightly softer ride than you got with things like the Adidas Adios, newer versions like the 6. So I thought, yeah, maybe there was potential here. It was still fairly blocky underfoot, but not in an unpleasant way, and it did have a decent amount of versatility. But I realised as I continued my testing, all those early runs were quite short runs, and I think this is where the shoe works okay if you're mainly someone who's running up to around 5 miles for your daily training. But once I started moving into longer stuff, whether that was easy or fast stuff, it started to really go off the shoe a fair bit, just because it isn't that comfortable. It's not uncomfortable, it's not really unpleasant on the foot, but it isn't a comfortable sensation to use it, especially for longer easy runs. It just feels a bit blocky and hard to get into a rhythm with, and it's not a shoe you can really relax with. And if you try and do long runs at a faster pace, no, it just doesn't give you a lot back. Like, there's so many great shoes out there now that have got either really impressive foams that are nice and bouncy and responsive, or you know, they've got some kind of plate in them, or just more of a rocker than this shoe, and it just helps you maintain a nice rhythm when you're holding a good pace over long times. And this just feels quite slappy and hard, and it's not that light, so it just doesn't really feel like it's giving you a lot for that kind of training. I really don't think that puck of Lightstrike Pro is doing a whole lot. Like sometimes when I was running, again, at the start of my shorter runs, I feel as a heel striker, as I move through my foot strike from the EVA at the back onto the forefoot, I can feel a little bit of that softness from the Lightstrike Pro and a little bit of pop, but it's really very small. The dominant feeling is very much Lightstrike EVA, which is not a foam I really hate. I know a lot of people really don't like it, but I find it kind of okay. But if you're coming into this hoping for a big, nice sensation of that Lightstrike Pro in the forefoot, you're not really getting it here. You get more of it, certainly, I think, from shoes like the Boston or the Adios, and obviously the shoes that have full Lightstrike Pro midsoles, like the Adios Pro 3 and Takumi Sen 8. Well, I do think it was pretty versatile on short runs. Like, it was okay for easy runs, and it was okay for faster runs if they were short stuff. It's just, there are so many shoes I'd rather be using for those runs. It doesn't really excel. Like, it's versatile in the sense that you can use it for them, but it's not a shoe I really enjoy using. I sometimes mention that when I do my training diary, I have little smiley face ratings for each run, and there are some shoes that just always pull out like a smiley face. They make me smile. I enjoy using them. This is just a classic flat line. Like, okay, yeah, I've gone out and done my run, and the shoe was fine, but it just doesn't really give you joy, and it's pretty lifeless, basically. So it's kind of okay, but there are certainly, I think, more enjoyable shoes out there, and that's even when you consider the price of this shoe, which is obviously a key part of its appeal. It's a reasonably cheap shoe, but there are cheaper shoes that I think are more fun. Come on to that in the verdict. One thing I think it does do well is it does have a place in the Adidas range. It does sit between the Adios and the Boston for me. It's more comfortable and better suited for daily training than the Adios, although lots of people do like using that for daily training. I would find it a bit too fast and snappy for me for daily training, and it is a bit lighter and also a lot cheaper than the Boston. But I do think the Boston is an all-round more accomplished shoe. I would enjoy using the Boston for fast stuff, especially sustained fast efforts like tempo runs or longer reps that go over like 10 minutes, that kind of thing. The Boston with the energy rods in it and just the better balance of foams, I think it has a ride that is more equipped to handle those longer fast things, whereas this is just a bit lighter, and otherwise I think it doesn't give you a lot back. I think it's going to last well, though. Lightstrike EVA foam is pretty hard wearing. That's one benefit of it being a fairly firm shoe to start with. And the outsole actually hasn't got that little bit of continental rubber, but that wasn't a problem for me. So it's actually gripped really well, and I've been running some icy conditions, lots of wet conditions, and the rubber feels very firm. I think that's going to last a good long time as well. So on durability and grip, those are both strong pluses, and that's good considering it's quite a cheap shoe, but on all-round performance, yeah, it didn't really wow me. So while the Adizero SL might make some sense in Adidas's range, adding a cheaper option to the Adizero range and one that maybe sits between the Adios and the Boston, you don't just have to shop at Adidas. And if you look out across the marketplace, there are so many shoes, I think, that are just better than this shoe at similar prices or lower prices for similar kinds of job. The one that obviously springs to mind straight away for me is the Puma Velocity Nitro 2. That is just a much more fun shoe to run in. It's a little bit heavier than the Adidas, but it's got a better outsole, and it's got a much better midsole that's soft and comfortable on easy runs, but has a little bit of spring and bounce when you do want to increase the pace, and it's a shoe you can go very long in regularly and just enjoy doing that in the shoe. And then the Puma Velocity Nitro 2 is a little bit cheaper in the UK and the same price in the USA, and often in sales. So there you go. Straight away, if you're looking for value and a better shoe, that's one I'd recommend straight away. And there's also the Reebok Float Ride Energy 4, which is a lot cheaper. It's 75 quid in the UK. I think it's $100 or $110 in the US. Again, slightly cheaper, a firmer feel, so it's more akin to the Adizero SL in that sense. It's got that. If you are looking for a firmer feel in a cheap, reliable daily trainer, then the Reebok does that, but it also gives a bit more back if you're trying to run fast, and it's more comfortable over longer runs as well. So another great shoe if you're looking for a non-plated daily trainer at a good price. I'd choose one of the Puma or the Reebok over this for sure. And if you're just looking to spend a little bit more, opening up some amazing shoes like the Hoka Mach 5, the New Balance Rebel V3, which I've been using at the same time as the SL, and it's just lighter, bouncier, more fun, more comfortable, faster, and it's just so much, that's a shoe that really brings me joy. That's a big smiley face in my training diary, the Rebel V3. So that is one I'd look at. It's a little bit more expensive than the SL. I think it's 130 quid or $130, but you're going to get a lot higher level of performance, I think, by going for that shoe. But it is a bit softer, so you might, if you are looking for a firmer ride, that is one thing that the Adizero SL provides, but even then I'd look at the Reebok for that. I also actually think I prefer the Nike Pegasus 39, which is a fair bit heavier and not, I think, quite as good for shorter speed stuff as the Adizero SL. Some people have been pitching this as Adidas's Pegasus option in the range. It's a similar price point and it's designed to be a versatile daily trainer, but the Pegasus is a lot more comfortable for easy runs, I think, and especially for going long. So that's, it's a better workhorse shoe, I think, because I just didn't really enjoy running long, easy runs in this shoe because it just wasn't very comfortable and it felt like it was trying to push me to go a bit faster. So it is a slightly better speed day shoe than the Pegasus, but the Pegasus is the more rounded shoe, I'd say. And then if you are looking at the Adidas range, I would look for a deal on the Boston. I think it's a better daily trainer all round, and a lot of people do find the Adios okay to train in every day as well. So if you don't mind using the Adios, if you find it comfortable enough to use regularly for daily training, it's a better shoe, I think, than the SL for sure, and it's not that much more expensive. And again, all of these shoes are often in sales. I mean, this will come down in price, and you might spot it for something like 50, 60 quid, something like that in the sale somewhere, and maybe there's some merit there, but even then, I think the Puma and the Reebok shoes are going to be around that price in sales as well, and I just much preferred them. I really did enjoy doing any kind of run more in those shoes. So this is, broadly speaking, fine. Like, it's no case I didn't hate running in it, but and if you're someone who likes firmer ride, sticks to shorter runs in general, wants a nice versatile Adidas shoe, then it might tick the boxes there. Although I think the Adios probably ticks those boxes better. But if you're looking around the market, there are lots of better options, and I don't need to go through them all again.
So my verdict then on the Adidas Adizero SL. Now I think you can see what Adidas is shooting for here. They're looking for a more affordable, more accessible, fast daily trainer that carries some of that technology, the midsole technology, from the faster shoes like Adios Pro 3 and the Takumi Zen and those shoes, and bring it back down the line and open it up to a kind of wider spectrum of runners who can use this shoe for daily training and not those other shoes where you might just want to save them for racing. The problem here for me is that I don't think it's really accomplished enough by way of kind of offering sort of cushioning and protection, because of the EVA Lightstrike foam just feels far too solid to me. It feels a bit brick-like at the back, and it means that, essentially I'm only really getting the best out of these shoes when I'm kind of moving at paces that I would really be running in the other shoes, in the Adios Pro or the Takumi Zen. And so, in terms of that overall versatility, when you're talking about a daily trainer, this Adidas shoe drops into a market that's really, really competitive at the moment. There are some great trainers that have great versatility across a range of paces. And I just don't think they're up there as good as the Hoka Mach 5. I don't think they're as good as the Puma Velocity Nitro 2 even, which comes in slightly cheaper. I don't think they're, even out there. There's some other shoes that I've been testing recently. I tested the Brooks Levitate 6, which I think are a bit more of a forgiving ride. Maybe not quite as poppy when you hit the forefoot, but overall I think they're up there sort of with the comparison here, a little bit pricier those. But I just think these shoes currently sort of drop into a market. If you think about even the kind of Speed 3, which I think is great for all those all-out kind of faster sort of tempo runs and even beyond that, but still when you're going slow they cope nicely. They've got good stability. I just think the Adi hasn't really nailed it as well as some of those other shoes. I was really kind of hoping for better. I was quite excited about what this shoe might bring, not least because I think Adidas doesn't, for my mind, really have a good daily trainer in the market. Now there is a caveat to that. I do like a firm ride shoe, but if you really like a direct, firm daily trainer, then I think these shoes might fit your bill. That's exactly what they do. And at £110, they are keenly priced. So, I think there's arguably some good value for money here if you like that kind of shoe. But I get a sense of the comments, from the channel here. I feel like these are going to miss the mark for quite a few runners out there.
That's it, guys. That is our review of the Adizero SL shoe. Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you like this shoe a lot? Do you disagree entirely with Kieran and I and would rate it above loads of shoes that we just mentioned there? Please do mention that in the comments, and then like and subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.